According to prominent hedge fund manager Michael Burry, the US economy will surely experience a far more severe recession than most analysts forecast. Burry, who got to national attention after his bet against the US housing market was documented in The Big Short, stated that authorities had no viable choices for averting an impending economic crisis. What strategy will pull us out of this real recession? What forces will pull us so? There are none, Burry wrote Tuesday night in a now deleted tweet. So we are really looking at an extended multi-year recession. Who's predicting this? There are none. Burry's new warning comes as the Federal Reserve continues its perilous path of lowering inflation through interest rate rises while avoiding a recession and upsetting the job market. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has recognized that the route to such an economic soft landing had shrunk. In this video, we will tell you about the expectations related to the possible upcoming recession in 2023, so stay with us. The investor of The Big Short renown appears to be implying that the Federal Reserve and the US government have few viable choices for bolstering growth. He has already criticised authorities of creating inflation by infusing the economy with money during the epidemic, warning that doing so would make future growth more challenging and expensive, particularly if it would drive price hikes. Burry has been anticipating a recession for quite some time. In June, he remarked that, in the face of rising costs and interest rates, Americans are saving less, borrowing more, and are on track to deplete their savings by Christmas. These developments, he says, threaten to crimp consumer spending, diminish business earnings, and precipitate an economic collapse. It's natural to be concerned right now. It makes sense. It's logical. So, bear with us on this. Let's first talk a bit about the most significant part. So, what are the most significant threats for the future years? The ongoing rise in pricing pressures has been one of 2022's biggest surprises. The Bank of England, the US Federal Reserve, and the European Central Bank were caught off guard by a sharp increase in pricing that was caused by a confluence of rising energy costs, personnel bottlenecks, and supply restrictions. Before starting to drop, the Bank of England expects annual increases in the cost of living to surpass 5%. The central banks would have to make challenging judgments, though, if inflation proves to be more widespread than anticipated. Just before Christmas, Saxo Bank published its 10 outrageous projections of unlikely but likely events for 2023, one of which was a wage price cascade in the United States, which would push price increases in the greatest economy in the world well beyond historical norms. Even a much smaller increase would prompt the Fed to tighten its monetary policies forcefully. So, the clock is ticking on whether or not the United States will experience another recession. There seems to be chatter for years that the world's second largest economy is due to experience a major economic slump, but this has not occurred. However, past issues are now combining with present concerns, potentially creating a perfect hurricane. An illustration of earlier issues is Beijing's strategies to deal with Evergrande's collapse and stop its difficulties from spreading across the economy. Evergrande, like many other businesses in the sector, expanded as Beijing loosened regulations, but had difficulties when the government took steps to slow the economy. China is the source of the supply side problems in the global economy, and has chosen a safe course of action in response to COVID-19. The nationalist rhetoric from Xi Jinping has increased in response to the slowing economy, particularly with regard to Taiwan. Geopolitics and economics may clash in 2023. However, there is a larger, more basic issue at hand. A huge number of developing nations have incurred significant US dollar debt, usually using future export profits as collateral. As the US Federal Reserve tightens its monetary policy, the dollar is anticipated to increase, making it more expensive for poorer countries to fulfill their obligations. If the world economy also declines, they will suffer a double blow. The World Bank and International Monetary Fund have previously issued warnings about rising debt levels. The economic harm is now most noticeable in nations where the pandemic has had the most impact and where international trade, tourism, commodity exports, and outside finance are largely dependent. While the severity of the disruption will differ by region, all emerging economies have weaknesses that are exacerbated by external shocks. Furthermore, disruptions in education and basic healthcare are likely to have long-term consequences for human capital development. Global growth is predicted to decrease but remain solid in the baseline scenario, averaging 3.7% from 2022 to 2023. Global GDP might be significantly worse, averaging 2.4% in 2022 to 2023, if the prospect of repeated local COVID-19 breakouts, combined with a substantial tightening of global financial conditions, a faltering recovery scenario, materializes. The global picture would then be similar to the sluggish recovery that followed the financial crisis of 2009. If you use NBER statistics to look at American economic history, you'll find that the actual expansion period is roughly 38.73 months. Because our present economic expansion began in June 2009, a recession would have occurred in August 2012, which would have been horrible timing for President Barack Obama. But it didn't. We've enjoyed almost 10 years of economic growth, one of the longest in US history. It seems that this was the calm before the storm. Sadly, some negative economic news is long overdue. But when is it likely to occur? The US economy will have a recession, but not until 2022. Most economic crises will come as a result of Federal Reserve policy, which many enterprises are unready for. The decline isn't expected in 2022, but it might happen as soon as 2023. If the Fed manages to prevent a recession in 2023, expect a worsening depression in 2024 or 2025. While a recession in 2022 is unlikely, 2023 and 2024 are exceedingly dangerous. The Federal Reserve will start reducing its massive assistance policy soon, and short-term interest rates will begin to rise in mid-2022. The economy replies with a time lag of about 1 year plus or minus. In the brief term, the greatest danger is that the Fed discovers that most of the recent rising prices are permanent rather than temporary. They'll then slam on the brakes. The Fed may opt to stomp harder on the brakes due to the time lag, creating a recession. The bright news is that a recession can somehow be avoided. It is technically doable. The Fed would have to compress at just the correct timing and size, and then return to neutral at precisely the right time. Don't get too excited. It's possible, but the chances are quite tiny. The Fed's employees are intelligent and knowledgeable, but the work is too complex for them. As a result, firms should take advantage of their profits in 2022 while preparing for the near certain recession of 2023. Before you go, keep in mind that we need a 6-month period of significant downturn in the economy to label it a recession. As a result, we're not yet in a recession. We'll have to wait and watch how this bizarre situation plays out in 2023. The crucial thing to remember here is that, regardless of how the economy performs in the next months, this economic downturn is just transitory. With that in mind, now is a good moment to start preparing as though a recession is becoming real. Did you find this video interesting? If so, Don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments.